Station Kronos 7 orbited a dying star in the outer terminus sector, which was fitting because most cadets felt like they were dying by the end of their first week. The Galactic Military Academy had a reputation that preceded it across 47 star systems. Elite training for elite species, the best of the best, the cream of the crop, and a whole bunch of other phrases that basically meant the same thing but sounded more impressive in committee meetings. The facility itself looked like someone had taken a military base, a prison, and a high-end spa, then kept only the worst parts of each. Grey metal corridors stretched for miles. The gravity could be adjusted to crush you or make you float, depending on which training module was currently trying to kill you. And somewhere, in a boardroom that probably had very comfortable chairs, the Academy leadership congratulated themselves on creating the perfect environment for forging galactic warriors. Marcus Webb arrived on a Tuesday, which immediately marked him as different. Most cadets arrived in ceremonial shuttles with family delegations and enough luggage to stock a small colony. Marcus showed up on a commercial transport, carrying one duffel bag and wearing a shirt that said Earth Gymnasium Regional Champion 2247. Nobody knew what a gymnasium was, but the confidence radiating off this human suggested it was either very impressive or very delusional. Probably delusional. The reception area bustled with alien cadets from a dozen species, all trying to look tough, while secretly wondering if they'd made a terrible mistake. Vex, a Quillarian with 4 arms and a nervous disposition, was already calculating the statistical probability of his survival. The translator implant in his third ear kept glitching because he was thinking in mathematics faster than it could convert to standard galactic. In 73% chance of muscular failure in week 1, Vex muttered to himself, wringing 2 of his hands together while the other 2 clutched his datapad. 89% chance of psychological breakdown by week 3. 99.7% chance I'm going to regret every life choice that led me here. Next to him stood Torva, a Draxian who looked like someone had crossbred a crocodile with a tank and then given the result, an attitude problem. Draxians were known across the galaxy for 3 things: their incredible strength, their impenetrable scales, and their absolute certainty that they were better than everyone else. Torva embodied all 3 qualities with the subtlety of a supernova. Weak species should not be permitted to train alongside Draxian warriors, Torva announced to nobody in particular, which was his way of announcing things to everybody. This academy has lowered its standards. Floating above them both was Xena, a lumini who existed as a vaguely humanoid arrangement of crystalline structures that glowed with inner light. Lumini is communicated through a combination of light pulses and harmonic chimes that their translators converted into the most condescending possible phrasing. It was unclear if this was accurate translation or editorializing, but nobody had ever met a humble lumini, so probably accurate. "How quaint," Xena chimed, her lights pulsing in what might have been amusement. "The reptilian believes physical strength matters in an age of plasma weaponry and tactical coordination. How delightfully primitive." Torva's scales rattled, which was the Draxian equivalent of clenching your fists. "Perhaps the floating nightlight would like to test Draxian strength personally." Before Xena could respond with what would undoubtedly be a devastating comeback, delivered at the speed of light, the doors at the far end of the reception area slammed open with enough force to dent the walls. Drill Instructor Krath entered like a natural disaster with a rank insignia. Krath was a Vortan, a species that looked like someone had tried to design the perfect soldier, and given up halfway through, leaving something that resembled a bipedal beetle wearing permanent armor plating. He had trained 17,000 cadets over a 40-year career. He had seen species rise and fall. He had witnessed acts of heroism and cowardice in equal measure. And he had absolutely 0 patience for anything that even slightly resembled nonsense. "Attention!" His voice could have stripped paint off a battleship. Every cadet in the room snapped to their species' equivalent of attention. Vex's 4 arms shot straight out in different directions. Torva's spine went rigid enough to use as a support beam. Xena stopped glowing for a full second, which, for a lumini, was basically playing dead. Marcus looked up from his datapad, smiled, and waved. Krath's eyes, all 6 of them, focused on the human with the intensity of targeting lasers. He walked across the room with deliberate steps, stopping directly in front of Marcus. The human was shorter than Krath by at least a foot, lighter by probably 200 pounds, and completely unconcerned by the walking personification of military discipline looming over him. "You," Krath said, his voice dropping from battleship paint stripper to merely bulldozer engine loud, "are the human." "That's what my paperwork says," Marcus agreed cheerfully. "Marcus Webb, Earth Federation. Excited to be here, sir." Excited. Krath repeated the word, like he was trying to understand a foreign concept. "In my 40 years of service, I have trained Draxians who could bend steel with their bare hands, Quilarians who could calculate artillery trajectories in their sleep, Lumines who could coordinate fleet movements across light years. I have never, in all that time, trained a human." "Well, hey, first time for everything, right?" Krath leaned down, bringing his face level with Marcus's. "Do you know why I have never trained a human, Cadet Webb? Budget constraints, paperwork error. Earth was too busy dealing with the whole first contact thing." "Because humans are soft." Krath straightened up, addressing the entire room now. "Your species evolved on a paradise world with moderate gravity, temperate climate, and no significant natural predators. You have no natural armor, no enhanced strength, no specialized combat adaptations. You are, by every measurable standard, the least qualified species in this room." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "You know, that's a really common misconception about Earth. People hear water world and oxygen-rich atmosphere and think it sounds nice. But there's this thing we have called weather that's actually pretty exciting. And the predators are great, very diverse. We've got everything from microscopic bacteria that can kill you to 20-foot sharks. Real variety." Krath stared at him. The entire room stared at him. Vex's translator glitched again. "You will wash out within 2 weeks," Krath said with absolute certainty. "But until then, you will follow orders, maintain standards, and try not to die. Is that understood?" "Crystal clear, sir." Krath turned to address the assembled cadets. "Tomorrow you will face the first of many trials designed to separate the elite from the pretenders. The Titan Hammer trial has been administered to cadets for 300 years. It has broken bodies, spirits, and more than a few bones. Those who cannot complete it will be reassigned to auxiliary positions. Those who can will take the first step toward becoming galactic military officers." He paused for dramatic effect. "Last year, 2 cadets were flattened during the trial. Literally flattened. They survived, but their military careers did not. Let that be a lesson about respecting the tools of war." Vex's mathematical calculations immediately shifted to calculating his funeral arrangements. Torva grinned, already imagining his triumphant performance. Zena pulsed with what might have been anticipation, or possibly just lunch digestion. It was hard to tell with Lumines. Marcus raised his hand. "What?" Krath said with dangerous calm. "Do we get to see the hammer beforehand? I like to know the specs on equipment before using it. Back home, my gym coach always said, proper preparation prevents poor performance." "Your gym coach," Krath repeated slowly, "is not here. The Titan hammer will be revealed during the trial. You will lift it, maneuver with it, and complete the required exercises. Or you will fail. Those are your specifications." "Fair enough. Looking forward to it, sir." As Krath dismissed them to their quarters, Vex sidled up to Marcus with all 4 arms wrapped around his datapad like it might protect him from reality. "You seem very calm about this," Vex said, his voice modulating through 3 different frequencies of nervousness. "The Titan hammer has a failure rate of 68% among species significantly stronger than humans. Your physiological profile suggests you have approximately 0% chance of success." Marcus shrugged, hefting his duffel bag. "I mean, how heavy can it be?" The Titan hammer lived in Training Bay 7, which was less of a bay and more of a cathedral dedicated to the religion of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but might still kill you. The bay stretched 3 stories high with observation decks along the walls, where instructors could watch cadets suffer from comfortable vantage points. The floor was reinforced durasteel designed to withstand orbital bombardment, which gave you some idea of what kind of training occurred here. At the center of the bay, mounted on a ceremonial display platform like some kind of ancient artifact, sat the Titan hammer. It was exactly what the name suggested. A massive warhammer forged from compressed neutronium alloy and enhanced with localized gravity field generators. The handle alone was 8 feet long, wrapped in traditional leather from some species' homeworld that probably didn't exist anymore. The hammerhead was a rectangular block of metal 3 feet across and 2 feet high, covered in ceremonial engravings that told the story of the Academy's founding. Those engravings also conveniently hid the warning labels that would have said things like, "Caution. May cause catastrophic skeletal failure, and not responsible for crushed limbs or shattered dreams." Those engravings also conveniently hid the warning labels that would have said things like, "Caution may cause catastrophic skeletal failure and not responsible for crushed limbs or shattered dreams." The specifications were impressive in the way that natural disasters are impressive. 400 galactic standard units of weight, which converted to roughly 900 pounds Earth standard. The gravity field generators added another 50% to the perceived weight during movement, making it feel closer to 1,300 pounds, once you tried to actually do something with it, beyond staring in horror. Standard trial procedure was simple, at least in description if not execution. Lift the hammer, carry it 20 paces. Perform 3 overhead swings. Hold it at extension for 10 seconds. Return it to the platform. Complete the sequence in under 60 seconds without dying, crying, or both. Vex had been researching Titan hammer trial data for the past 18 hours, and the results were not encouraging. His datapad displayed casualty statistics going back 3 decades, organized by species, attempt number, and type of injury sustained. The Draxians have the highest success rate at 42%, Vex explained to a small group of cadets gathered in the mess hall the night before the trial. His 4 hands gestured at different data visualizations simultaneously. The Vortans achieve 38%, even the mighty Corinthians, who have natural exoskeletal support structures, only manage 29% success. And humans? Someone asked. There is no data on humans, Vex said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Because humans have never attempted the trial. Because humans are not designed for this level of physical stress. The average human skeletal structure would collapse under a load exceeding 600 pounds. The Titan hammer weighs 900 pounds before the gravity enhancement. Torva laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling down a mountain. He was holding a protein supplement pack designed for species with metabolisms that could process small stars. The human will fail before he touches the hammer. His kind are weak, soft. They have no place among warriors. Actually, Marcus said from 3 tables away where he'd been quietly eating something the mess hall claimed was chicken, but was definitely not chicken, humans can lift quite a bit when properly trained. The current Earth record for deadlift is over 1,200 pounds. That's without any genetic modification or alien tech. Every head in the mess hall turned to look at him. 1,200, Vex repeated, his translator struggling with the number. Pounds, Earth pounds. Yep, guy's name was Eddie Hall. Real inspiration. Passed out after the lift, but he got it done. Torva's scales rattled with what might have been concern disguised as contempt. One outlier does not represent a species' capability. True. Eddie was exceptional. But even average gym enthusiasts back home can lift 300 to 500 pounds pretty regularly. It's just, basic weight training. Good for bone density and cardiovascular health. Xena floated down to Marcus's eye level, her crystalline structure pulsing with confused light patterns. You are claiming that your species regularly subjects themselves to potentially lethal physical stress for health purposes? Well, yeah. Exercise. It's kind of a whole thing. We have buildings specifically designed for it. Gyms, we call them. People pay money to go there and pick up heavy objects, and then put them down again. Sometimes we add extra weight, just to make it harder. That is the most inefficient and nonsensical cultural practice I have ever encountered, Xena chimed. You should see competitive eating. Instructor Krath entered the mess hall at that moment, and the room fell silent. He carried a holographic projector, which he activated with a casual gesture. A 3-dimensional image of the Titan hammer appeared, rotating slowly in the air above the assembled cadets. Tomorrow at 800 hours you will face this weapon, Krath announced. It has ended the academy careers of more cadets than any other single trial. Last year, on this very date, 2 cadets learned what happens when you disrespect the Titan hammer. The hologram shifted to show security footage from the previous year's trial. A pair of Zenthari brothers, tall and lean with their species' characteristic silver skin, stood near the platform making what appeared to be mocking gestures at another cadet who was struggling with the hammer. The cadet, a Draxian female who looked like she could bench press a shuttle, managed to lift the hammer and complete 2 of the required overhead swings. On the 3rd swing, her muscles gave out. The hammer fell. She tried to catch it, overcorrected, and sent the massive weapon bouncing across the floor like the world's most dangerous basketball. The Zenthari brothers had approximately half a second to realize their mistake before 900 pounds of neutronium alloy rolled over them with the inevitability of continental drift. The footage showed them being extracted from beneath the hammer, flattened to roughly half their normal thickness, but miraculously alive, thanks to their species' cartilaginous skeletal structure. They were loaded onto medical stretchers that had to be specially modified to accommodate their new pancake-like dimensions. The Zenthari brothers recovered physically after 6 months of regenerative therapy, Krath continued as the hologram faded. Their pride recovered never. They were reassigned to logistics support positions where the heaviest thing they lift is a data pad. He turned off the projector and surveyed the room. The Titan hammer demands respect. It demands strength. It demands perfection. Those who cannot provide all 3 will fail. Those who fail will be reassigned. Are there any questions? Marcus raised his hand. Krath's eyes closed briefly, as if asking the universe for patience. What is it, Cadet Webb? Is there an equipment manual for the hammer? I'd like to review the specifications and proper handling procedures. My coach always said you should understand your equipment before using it. Your coach is not here. Yeah, you mentioned that yesterday. But the principle still applies, right? I mean, if there are specific grip techniques or weight distribution considerations, it would be helpful to know those in advance. Just trying to be prepared. Krath walked over to Marcus's table with slow, measured steps. He leaned down, placing both hands on the surface, his face inches from the human's. Cadet Webb, he said quietly. Tomorrow you will grasp the handle, lift the hammer, and attempt the trial. You will do this with no preparation, no manual, and no excuses. You will either succeed through strength and determination, or you will fail and be reassigned to a position more suitable for your species' limitations. Do you understand? Marcus met his gaze without flinching. Understood, sir. Just wanted to ask. As Krath left the mess hall, Torva turned to Marcus with something approaching respect in his expression. You were either very brave or very stupid to question the instructor. Probably a bit of both, Marcus admitted. But hey, no harm in asking questions. Worst he can do is say no. The worst he can do, Vex said, all 4 hands trembling slightly, is watch you get crushed by the Titan hammer while taking notes on human skeletal fragility. Marcus finished his definitely not chicken and stood up, stretching his arms overhead. Several joints popped audibly. Guess we'll find out tomorrow. I'm going to get some sleep. Big day ahead. As he left the mess hall, Torva watched him go with a puzzled expression. He shows no fear. Is this human stupidity or human courage? With humans, Zena chimed thoughtfully, her lights pulsing in contemplative patterns. I suspect they are the same thing. Training Bay 7 filled with cadets at precisely 0755 hours because nobody wanted to give Instructor Krath an excuse to make their day worse. The observation decks were packed with upper-year students who had survived the Titan Hammer trial, and now took perverse pleasure in watching new cadets face the same ordeal. The Academy's medical team stood by with stretchers, regeneration equipment, and the universal expression of professionals who knew their services would definitely be needed. The Titan Hammer sat on its platform like a judge awaiting the condemned. Krath stood beside it, his posture radiating military precision and barely contained disdain for the soft cadets before him. He held a data pad with the trial roster, organized by species strength rankings from highest to lowest. This meant Luminias went first, followed by Quilarians, then various other species, with Draxians performing last as a demonstration of proper technique. Humans weren't on the original roster because nobody had expected one to show up, but Marcus's name had been added at the very end after the Draxians in a position that clearly communicated, "We'll get to you if we have time, and if you haven't already fled in terror." "Cadet Xena," Krath called out, "step forward!" Xena floated to the platform, her crystalline structure pulsing with what her translator interpreted as serene confidence, but probably meant, "I've made a terrible mistake." Luminais didn't have muscles in the traditional sense, but they could manipulate localized gravity fields through conscious effort, which theoretically allowed them to move objects. Theoretically. Xena extended her consciousness toward the Titan hammer, her entire being glowing brighter as she focused her considerable mental energy on the task. The hammer trembled. The crowd leaned forward. The medical team readied their equipment. The hammer rose 3 inches off the platform. Xena's glow intensified to the point where several cadets had to shield their eyes. The hammer rose another inch. Sweat, or the Lumini equivalent of sweat, which was probably just excess photons, radiated from her form. The hammer stayed suspended for exactly 4.7 seconds, according to Vex, who was timing everything, before dropping back to the platform with a resounding clang that echoed through the bay like a death knell. Xena dimmed significantly, looking like a nightlight on its last battery. "I have demonstrated the Lumini approach to the trial," she announced through her translator, which struggled to make her exhausted chimes sound dignified. "Physical strength is obsolete in modern warfare." "Cadet Xena has failed the trial," Krath announced without emotion. "She will be reassigned to tactical coordination where her species' natural abilities can be better utilized. Next. Cadet Vex." Vex approached the platform with all 4 arms trembling, and his translator cycling through what sounded like prayers in 6 different languages. He stared at the Titan hammer like it had personally insulted his entire family lineage. "You can do this," he whispered to himself. "It's just physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. Distributed load across 4 arms reduces individual stress by 75%. Simple mathematics." He gripped the handle with all 4 hands, positioning himself according to calculations he'd run approximately 800 times the previous night. He bent his legs, engaged his core, and lifted. The Titan hammer rose off the platform. The crowd gasped. Vex's translator started glitching from the strain, outputting random phrases like potato harvest and inevitable doom, while he held the hammer approximately 6 inches off the ground. His forearms shook like leaves in a hurricane. His breathing came in rapid, shallow gasps that his species used when facing imminent death or particularly difficult math problems. He managed to hold it for 5 seconds before his body decided that survival was more important than pride. The hammer fell. Vex jumped backward, all 4 arms windmilling for balance, and avoided getting his feet crushed by approximately half an inch. He collapsed on the floor, all 4 arms spread out in different directions, looking like he'd just gone 12 rounds with existence itself and lost on points. "Cadet Vex has failed the trial," Krath announced, "but showed adequate survival instincts. Reassignment pending. Next cadets." The trials continued with predictable results. Most cadets couldn't lift the hammer at all. A few managed to get it off the platform for a handful of seconds. One particularly optimistic Phrythian tried to use leverage and physics to compensate for lack of strength, succeeded in lifting the hammer 3 feet, and then lost control of it in a way that sent him scrambling for safety, while the hammer gouged a 3-inch trench in the reinforced floor. Then came the Draxians. Torva stepped forward, his scales gleaming with what might have been oil, or possibly just natural superiority. He'd been waiting for this moment, imagining it, rehearsing what he'd say afterward when the lesser species congratulated him on his inevitable success. He gripped the Titan hammer and lifted it like he was personally offended by its weight. The hammer rose smoothly, no shaking, no strain visible in his massive frame. He carried it 20 paces, each step measured and deliberate. He performed the first overhead swing with perfect form, then the second. The crowd was impressed, despite themselves. On the 3rd swing, something went wrong. Maybe it was overconfidence. Maybe it was the gravity field generators choosing that exact moment to fluctuate. Maybe it was the universe deciding that Torva needed a lesson in humility delivered at 900 pounds per square inch. Whatever the cause, his grip slipped on the downswing. The Titan hammer fell at an angle, hit the ground and bounced. Not a small bounce, a significant bounce. This massive object is now following a trajectory that physics majors will study for years kind of bounce. And standing directly in its path were two cadets who had been spectating too close to the action area, despite repeated warnings. Two Zenthari brothers named Kix and Vix, who'd been making quiet comments about Draxian technique and were about to learn a very sudden lesson about spatial awareness. "Move," someone shouted. But by the time the sound waves reached the brothers' auditory organs, the hammer was already there. 900 pounds of neutronium alloy doesn't care about your reflexes. It doesn't care about your hopes and dreams. It doesn't care that you had plans for lunch. It simply obeys the laws of physics with absolute, ruthless efficiency. The hammer rolled over Kix and Vix like they were made of putty. There was a sound like someone stepping on bubble wrap, but wetter and more expensive from a medical billing perspective. The hammer continued rolling for another 10 feet before friction finally convinced it to stop. The medical team was already in motion before the hammer stopped moving. They'd been waiting for this, had probably taken bets on which cadet would be the year's pancake victim. Kix and Vix were extracted from beneath the hammer, their silvery bodies compressed to roughly half their normal thickness, their faces showing expressions of surprise that would have been comical if not for the immediate medical crisis. "Stretchers," the head medic called out. "Get regeneration gel and start the cartilage expansion protocol, and someone tell their family that they're alive but going to need some significant re-inflating." Kix and Vix were loaded onto special flat patient stretchers and rushed out of the training bay. They were conscious, which was unfortunate because it meant they were aware of their current two-dimensional existence. One of them tried to speak but only managed to produce a wheeze that sounded like air escaping from a tire. Krath surveyed the scene with the expression of someone who'd seen this exact scenario play out before, and was tired of filling out the paperwork. He turned to Torva, who stood frozen in horror at what his slip had caused. "Cadet Torva," Krath said with dangerous calm, "has completed the trial with adequate marks before losing control of the weapon. His technique was sound until it wasn't. He passes the trial but will receive remedial training on equipment control." Torva nodded mutely, still staring at the trench in the floor where the hammer had rolled over his fellow cadets. Krath turned to address the assembled cadets. "This is why the Titan hammer trial is sacred. This is why respect for equipment is paramount. This is why you do not stand in the potential trajectory zone of massive objects. Kix and Vix will recover, physically, in approximately 6 months. Their military careers are over. Their academy tenure is finished. They will return home as cautionary tales." He paused, letting that sink in. "The trial continues. Next cadet." The remaining cadets completed their attempts with significantly more caution and significantly less bravado. The observation decks had gone quiet. The festive atmosphere of watching cadets struggle had been replaced by the sobering reality that the Titan hammer wasn't just a test. It was a dangerous weapon that demanded absolute respect. As the final Draxian completed his trial, Krath consulted his datapad, then looked up with an expression that suggested he'd just remembered something unpleasant. "Cadet Webb," he called out, "the human, step forward." Every head in the training bay turned to look at Marcus, who'd been sitting cross-legged on the floor near the back of the room, apparently meditating or possibly just napping with his eyes open. He stood up, stretched, and walked toward the platform with the casual confidence of someone heading to the gym for a regular workout. "Sir," one of the medical team members called out, "should we prep for immediate skeletal reconstruction? Human bone density is significantly lower than most species here." "Have everything ready," Krath replied. "This will be quick." Marcus reached the platform and looked at the Titan hammer, really looked at it for the first time. He walked around it, examining the handle, the weight distribution, the balance point. He knelt down to check the grip texture. "Interesting design," he said, mostly to himself. "Good weight distribution. Handle's a bit long for my height, but I can work with it. The gravity field generators are mounted here and here, probably add about 30 to 40% to the perceived weight during movement." "Cadet Webb," Krath interrupted. "This is a trial, not a lecture. Lift the hammer, or admit defeat. Right. Sorry. Just like to understand equipment before I use it. Marcus positioned himself beside the hammer, adjusted his stance twice, then gripped the handle with both hands. The crowd held its collective breath. Marcus lifted the Titan hammer off the platform like he was picking up his gym bag. The silence in Training Bay 7 was so complete, you could have heard a pin drop. If pins made any noise when dropping, which they don't. But the metaphor stands because the silence was really quite profound. Marcus held the Titan hammer at waist height, adjusted his grip slightly, then lifted it overhead for a practice swing. The weapon moved through the air with perfect control, no shaking, no visible strain on his frame. He was looking at it with the critical eye of someone evaluating a new piece of equipment, not someone struggling under 900 pounds of gravitationally enhanced neutronium alloy. Huh, Marcus said. Balance is actually pretty good once you account for the gravity field offset. He performed the required 20 paces, his footsteps measured and steady. Each movement was controlled, professional, showing the kind of technique that came from actual training rather than just raw strength. He reached the designated mark and began the overhead swings. First swing, textbook perfect form, full extension, controlled descent. Second swing, identical to the first, muscle memory clearly engaged. Third swing, completed with enough control that he could have balanced a cup of water on the hammerhead. He held the hammer at extension for the required 10 seconds. At 15 seconds, he was clearly just showing off. At 20 seconds, Vex's translator started outputting error messages because the mathematics of what he was witnessing didn't align with any known model of human capability. Marcus returned the Titan hammer to its platform with a gentle touch that suggested he was worried about scratching the ceremonial engravings. He stepped back, brushed his hands together, and turned to face Instructor Krath. So, Marcus said into the stunned silence, does this thing come in a heavier size? For approximately 5 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The universe itself seemed to pause to process what it had just witnessed. Then chaos erupted. Vex's translator completely gave up and started playing what sounded like static mixed with mathematical proofs. All 4 of his arms were gesticulating wildly at nothing, like he was trying to physically fight the concept of human strength into submission. Torva's jaw had literally dropped open, his mouth hanging slack in a way that would have been comical if his entire worldview wasn't currently collapsing like a neutron star. Xena stopped glowing entirely, which for Illumini was the equivalent of a complete system shutdown. She just floated there, dark and silent, possibly rebooting her consciousness. The medical team stood frozen with their equipment, unsure what to do with themselves, since they'd prepared for traumatic injuries, and instead witnessed what looked like a routine workout. Up in the observation decks, 3 upper-year cadets fainted. 2 instructors dropped their datapads. One elderly Vortan veteran started laughing hysterically and had to be escorted out. Krath stared at Marcus, with an expression that cycled through disbelief, confusion, suspicion, and finally settled on a kind of existential resignation. His mandibles clicked together in a pattern that his species used when confronting information that challenged fundamental assumptions about reality. Did you? Krath said slowly. Just ask if the Titan hammer comes in a heavier size? Yeah. I mean, it's a good workout tool, don't get me wrong, but for actual strength building, I'd usually work with weights that challenge my maximum capacity. This feels more like a warm-up weight. Maybe 65–70% of my 1-rep max. Krath's datapad slipped from his hand and clattered on the floor. He didn't bend to pick it up. He couldn't look away from the human who had just casually described the Titan hammer, the weapon that had broken countless cadets and ended multiple military careers, as a warm-up weight. Warm-up, Krath repeated. Yeah. Back home, my training regiment had me working with 1,200 pounds for deadlifts, though that's more of a specialty lift. For practical strength training, I usually work in the 800 to 1,000 pound range with compound movements. The Titan hammer's probably around 900, maybe 1,300 with the gravity enhancement. That's solid, but not quite peak challenge level. Vex made a sound like a tea kettle having an existential crisis. 1,300 pounds. He just estimated the enhanced weight with the gravity field generators. How did he know about the gravity field generators? Those specifications are classified. I looked at where they were mounted, Marcus explained. Standard positioning for load enhancement systems. We have similar setups in some Earth gyms, though usually for reducing weight during rehabilitation, not increasing it. Pretty straightforward engineering once you understand the principles. Torva finally found his voice, though it came out several octaves higher than normal. You are saying that this trial, this sacred test of strength that has determined warrior eligibility for 300 years, is considered basic training on your world. Well, not basic. This would probably be intermediate to advanced level at most gyms. Beginners usually start with lower weights and work up. But yeah, this is pretty standard for anyone seriously into strength training. My grandfather had equipment in his home gym that was heavier than this, and he was just a hobbyist. Hobbyist. Xena suddenly blazed back to life, her lights pulsing so brightly that several cadets shielded their eyes. Your species lifts objects heavier than the Titan hammer for recreation. Sure, it's good for bone density, muscle development, cardiovascular health, and mental discipline. Plus, it's fun. There's something satisfying about picking up heavy objects and putting them down again. Very meditative. Krath walked over to the Titan hammer, placed both hands on it, and leaned against it like he needed the support to remain standing. When he spoke, his voice had lost its characteristic bark, and now sounded more like someone questioning every decision that had led to this moment. Cadet Webb, I need you to explain something to me very carefully. What is Earth's gravity? 1 Earth gravity. 9.8 meters per second squared, pretty standard for terrestrial planets in the habitable zone. And you consider this moderate? I mean, yeah, it's what we evolved in, so it's baseline for us. Why? What's the gravity here on the station? Imvex pulled up data on his miraculously recovered pad. Station Kronos 7 maintains 0.85 Earth standard gravity for comfort across multiple species. Marcus blinked. Oh, so I've been training in reduced gravity this whole time. That explains why everything feels a bit floaty. Floaty, Torva repeated. He describes our standard training environment as floaty. Krath pushed away from the Titan hammer and began pacing, his footsteps heavy on the reinforced floor. Let me understand this correctly. Your species evolved on a high-gravity world. It's not high gravity, it's just 1G, where you regularly subject yourselves to extreme physical stress for recreational purposes. I wouldn't call it extreme. And you consider our most challenging strength trial to be intermediate-level training. Marcus thought about it. I mean, when you put it that way, it sounds more impressive than it is. Earth is really not that dangerous. Sure, we have weather systems that can kill you, and earthquakes and volcanoes and hurricanes and tsunamis and tornadoes and wildfires. And the wildlife can be hazardous. We've got everything from bears to sharks to venomous spiders to microscopic bacteria that can shut down your organs. And I guess our atmosphere is about 21% oxygen, which is apparently pretty corrosive to most species. But we adapted to all that. It's just normal for us. The silence returned, heavier this time, weighted down by the growing realization that humanity had evolved on what most species would classify as a death world, and considered it paradise. Your species, Xena chimed quietly, hunts megafauna for sport. Well, yeah, hunting season is pretty popular in rural areas. Good way to connect with nature and provide food for your family. You eat the megafauna. Sure, deer, elk, wild boar. Some people hunt bear, though that's more advanced. The meat's pretty good if you prepare it right. Vex was frantically calculating something on his datapad, all 4 arms moving in a blur. According to my analysis, human evolution occurred in an environment with predation pressure from multiple apex species. Environmental hazards ranging from thermal extremes to seismic events, and constant exposure to parasitic and bacterial threats. This would necessitate development of extreme endurance capabilities, rapid healing factors, and strength-to-weight ratios that exceed most known species. That's just called living on Earth, Marcus said. Honestly, it's not as dramatic as you're making it sound. Krath stopped pacing and turned to face Marcus directly. Do you understand what you've done here today, Cadet Webb? Completed the trial? You have invalidated 300 years of strength assessment protocols. You have demonstrated that our understanding of human capability was fundamentally flawed. You have forced me to confront the possibility that every other species in this academy has been training at a level that your people would consider recreational. Oh, I mean, I didn't mean to invalidate anything. I was just answering honestly when you asked about the hammer coming in a heavier size. And that, Krath said, his voice heavy with resignation, is perhaps the most terrifying part of this entire situation. You weren't boasting. You weren't trying to show off. You were genuinely asking if we had more challenging equipment. Right, because proper progressive overload requires gradually increasing the challenge to maintain strength gains. If I just keep lifting the same weight, I'll plateau. Torva approached Marcus slowly, his scales clicking together in what might have been respect or possibly fear. You said your grandfather had heavier equipment. What was your grandfather? A warrior. A soldier. Nah, he was an accountant, but he liked to stay in shape, so he had a home gym. Did a lot of powerlifting in his spare time. Set some regional records back in his day. Your species produces warriors like you as a byproduct of accounting. Torva's voice cracked on the last word. Well, he wasn't a warrior, just a guy who liked to lift weights. Warriors would be like, our actual military personnel. Special forces, Marines, that kind of thing. Those folks train way harder than I do. Krath made a sound like a dying computer. There are humans stronger than you. Oh, definitely. I'm pretty average for someone who trains regularly. Elite athletes and military special operators are on a whole different level. I just do this for fun and general fitness. Average, Vex whispered, his translator barely functioning. He's average, by human standards. This is an average human. Krath picked up his fallen datapad and pulled up the Academy's equipment inventory. He scrolled through 3 centuries of training tools, weapons, and strength assessment devices. Finally, he looked back at Marcus. Cadet Webb, I don't know if we have anything in this facility that would challenge you. The Titan Hammer is our heaviest training implement. Marcus considered this. What about the emergency bulkhead doors? Those look pretty heavy. Or maybe some of the shuttle components in the maintenance bay. We could probably rig up something with enough weight plates. You want us to create custom training equipment because our existing tools are too light. I mean, only if it's not too much trouble. I don't want to be a bother. Krath looked at the Titan Hammer, then at Marcus, then back at the hammer. He seemed to be having some kind of internal dialogue with himself about the nature of reality and his place in it. The Academy will retrofit the Titan Hammer, he finally said. We will add additional gravity field generators and increase the base weight. You will have your heavier hammer, Cadet Webb, and may the ancestors help us all. Word spread through Station Kronos 7 faster than a hull breach, and considerably more dangerous to institutional ego. Within 6 hours, every cadet, instructor, and administrative staff member knew about the human who'd asked if the Titan Hammer came in a heavier size. Within 12 hours, the story had spread to 3 neighboring systems. Within 24 hours, betting pools had formed regarding what would happen when Marcus faced the upgraded equipment. The Academy leadership convened an emergency session in Conference Room Alpha, which was reserved for genuine crises like invasion threats or budget cuts. Commander Vrax, a Vortan administrator who'd overseen the Academy for 20 years, sat at the head of the table reviewing Marcus's trial footage for the 17th time. He's not straining, Vrax said, zooming in on Marcus's face during the overhead swings. Look at his expression. He's concentrating on form, not struggling with weight. This isn't a cadet pushing his limits. This is an athlete performing a routine exercise. Director Shala, a Quilarian who managed training protocols, had all 4 arms wrapped around herself in a gesture of deep distress. We need to completely revise our human capability estimates. Everything we thought we knew was based on preliminary contact data and physiological scans that apparently missed something fundamental. They didn't miss anything, countered Chief Medical Officer Venn, a lumine whose light pulsed with frustrated patterns. Human physiology is exactly as scanned. The problem is that we assumed their performance would match their biology. We didn't account for the fact that their biology evolved specifically to exceed what we'd consider normal limitations. So what you're saying, Vrax said slowly, is that humans are biologically normal, but environmentally insane. That's one way to phrase it. Vrax pulled up Earth's planetary data. The room collectively reviewed information they'd seen before, but hadn't truly understood. Gravity, 1G, which translated to 15% higher than galactic standard. Atmospheric oxygen, 21%, nearly double the average. Native megafauna, over 5,000 species of predators, many of which hunted in packs or possessed lethal venom. Weather systems, capable of producing wind speeds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour and temperature swings of 50 degrees within hours. This is a nightmare world, Shala said quietly. How did the initial contact teams classify this as paradise? Lots of water, Ven replied. Biodiversity, temperate zones. They focused on habitability for other species and didn't consider what it meant for the native population. Vrax closed the planetary data and pulled up Marcus's admission file. It says here that Cadet Webb was a regional champion in something called powerlifting. What's powerlifting? According to the attached documentation, it's a competitive sport where humans see who can lift the heaviest objects in 3 specific movements: squat, bench press, and deadlift. They compete to see who can lift the most, Shala repeated. They turned survival skills into organized competition. It gets better, Vrax continued, scrolling through the documentation. There are multiple categories based on body weight, age, and enhancement status. Cadet Webb competed in the natural category, meaning no genetic modifications or performance-enhancing substances. He lifted 1,200 pounds in the deadlift at a body weight of 190 pounds. The room did the math collectively, arriving at the same horrifying conclusion. That's over 6 times his body weight, Ven said. Our strongest Draxian on record lifted 4 times body weight, and that was considered exceptional. The equipment committee is already working on the Titan Hammer retrofit, Vrax announced. They're adding additional gravity field generators and increasing the base weight to 1,200 galactic units. That's approximately 2,700 pounds Earth standard. That seems excessive, Shala protested. The human asked for heavier, we're providing heavier. If he can't lift it, we'll know we've found his limit. If he can. Vrax trailed off, unwilling to finish the thought. Meanwhile, in the cadet quarters, Marcus was dealing with his own version of the fallout. His roommate, a Draxian named Crone, had moved all his belongings to the opposite side of the room and was sleeping with a chair wedged against his bunk. Apparently, the notion of sharing quarters with someone who could casually lift the Titan hammer had inspired some legitimate safety concerns. The mess hall had gone silent when Marcus entered for evening meal. Cadets parted like water as he approached the food dispensers. Someone dropped their tray and fled. Vex, however, approached him with all 4 arms full of datapads. I need to understand, Vex said without preamble. I've been analyzing human physiology for 18 hours, and nothing makes sense. Your muscle density is only marginally higher than baseline galactic standard. Your skeletal structure, while robust, doesn't explain the strength-to-weight ratio. Your neural conductivity is fast, but not exceptional. So how? Marcus accepted a tray of food and gestured for Vex to sit with him. It's not really any one thing, it's how all the systems work together. Our muscles contract differently than most species because of how our nervous system fires. We can recruit a higher percentage of our muscle fibers simultaneously. Plus, Earth's gravity means we're basically doing resistance training every moment of every day just by existing. You're saying you've been strength training since birth simply by standing upright? Pretty much. Every time we walk, climb stairs, carry objects, we're working against 1G of constant force. It adds up over years. Vex's translator crackled with static as he processed this. And the pain tolerance. What about it? During the trial, the gravity field enhancement would have caused significant discomfort to any other species. You showed no sign of distress. Marcus shrugged. I mean, yeah, it was uncomfortable. Yeah, it was. But discomfort is part of training. There's this thing we say back home. No pain, no gain. You have to push through discomfort to build strength. Your species has a saying that explicitly endorses suffering as a path to improvement, Vex said flatly. When you put it that way, it sounds kind of dark. But yeah, basically. Torva appeared at their table, moving with uncharacteristic caution. He set down his tray and sat across from Marcus, his scales clicking in what might have been nervousness. Human Marcus, Torva began formally. I wish to apologize for my earlier words about your species being weak. I spoke from ignorance. Hey, no worries. You didn't know. Honestly, I'm still trying to figure out why everyone's so surprised. Back home, this would be pretty normal. That is precisely what concerns me, Torva said. If you are normal by human standards, what are your warriors like? Oh man, Special Forces guys are intense. They do training exercises that would probably violate safety regulations here. 100-mile runs with full gear, swimming in freezing water for hours, going days without sleep while performing complex operations, and that's just the baseline stuff. Vex's translator started emitting a high-pitched whine. Days without sleep, 100-mile runs. This is your military training? For special operations, yeah. Regular military is less extreme, but still pretty rigorous. They have to be ready for anything because Earth is, kind of unpredictable. Xena floated down to their table, her crystalline structure pulsing with what her translator interpreted as cautious curiosity. I have been researching human cultural practices. Is it true that you have a tradition called marathon running, where you travel over 26 miles on foot for no practical purpose? Yep. Marathons are pretty popular. Some people do ultramarathons, which are even longer, 50 miles, 100 miles, sometimes more. More, Xena repeated. You said more. There are distances beyond 100 miles? Sure. There's this race called the Barkley Marathons that's about 130 miles through mountains and forests. Most people don't finish it. Real gnarly course. Your species voluntarily subjects themselves to extreme endurance events that most participants cannot complete for recreational purposes. Xena's translator somehow managed to convey existential horror through harmonic chimes. I mean, when you say it like that, it sounds weird, but it's about pushing limits, testing yourself, seeing what you're capable of. It's fun. Fun, Torva said. The human concept of fun involves voluntary suffering. Not just suffering, achievement, accomplishment, the satisfaction of knowing you did something difficult. Marcus paused. Hey, do you guys not have competitive sports or physical challenges? We have tactical simulations, Vex said, strategic games, tests of knowledge and skill. But not physical challenges? No running races, or strength competitions or anything like that? The aliens exchanged glances, a complex moment of interspecies communication that conveyed shared realization. Our physical capabilities are largely fixed by our biology, Xena explained. We can train to use them efficiently, but we cannot dramatically improve them. The concept of physical self-improvement through stress and recovery is not part of our cultural framework. Oh, Marcus said. That's actually kind of sad. You're missing out on the whole Gains experience. Gains? Vex asked cautiously. Muscle gains, strength gains, that feeling when you lift something you couldn't lift before, or run further than you could last month, or beat your personal record, it's one of the best feelings. Torva leaned forward. You are saying that humans can intentionally improve their physical capabilities beyond their baseline? Well, yeah, that's what training is. You stress your body, it adapts and gets stronger. You increase the stress, it adapts more. Progressive overload. Basic exercise science. The aliens sat in silence, processing this information. This explains so much, Vex finally said. Human military effectiveness, your species' expansion rate. The fact that you've only had faster-than-light travel for 30 years, but already established colonies on 17 worlds. I mean, we're motivated. There's a lot of cool stuff out here in space. Motivated, Xena chimed. That is an interesting euphemism for whatever survival drive compels your species to intentionally subject yourselves to hostile environments. Instructor Krath's voice boomed across the mess hall. Cadet Webb, report to Training Bay 7 immediately. The equipment retrofit is complete. Marcus stood, picked up his tray. Guess that's my cue. The new hammer must be ready. They've tripled the weight, Vex said quietly. I saw the specifications, 2,700 pounds. Oh, nice. That should be a good challenge. Marcus headed toward the disposal area, completely missing the look of horror that passed between the other cadets. He's excited, Torva observed. The human is excited about equipment designed to be impossible for him to lift. I think, Xena said thoughtfully, we may need to revise our entire understanding of human psychology in addition to human physiology. Training Bay 7 had been cleared of all cadets except for a select group of witnesses that included the academy leadership, senior instructors, and a medical team that had doubled in size since the morning's incident. The Titan hammer Merkei Saut sat on its platform like a monument to institutional overcompensation. The engineering team had outdone themselves. The original hammer had been retrofitted with 6 additional gravity field generators, integrated so seamlessly that they looked like original design elements. The neutronium alloy core had been expanded, the handle reinforced with crystalline polymer supports, and the entire weapon now glowed with a faint blue light from the enhanced gravity field. According to the specifications displayed on Vex's datapad, which he was clutching with all 4 arms, the Titan hammer Merkei II weighed exactly 1,200 galactic units at rest and approximately 2,700 pounds Earth standard with the gravity enhancement active. Marcus walked into the bay and stopped, looking at the hammer with genuine appreciation. "Oh wow, you guys really went all out. This looks great." Commander Vrax stepped forward, his expression grave. "Cadet Webb, you requested heavier equipment. We have provided it. This hammer weighs 3 times what the original Titan hammer weighs. It is, to our knowledge, the heaviest training implement ever created for individual use." "That's awesome. I really appreciate you guys going to this effort. We need you to understand something," Vrax continued. "This weapon is not designed for success. It is designed to establish your limitations. No cadet in Academy history has lifted even half this weight. We do not expect you to complete the trial. We simply need to know what your actual maximum capacity is, so we can properly calibrate training protocols for human cadets going forward." Marcus nodded. "That makes sense. Proper assessment is important for developing effective training programs. If you cannot lift it, there is no shame," Krath added. "You have already demonstrated capabilities beyond our initial estimates." "Right, but I should at least try, yeah?" Marcus approached the platform, examined the new hammer from multiple angles, tested the grip. "The balance is going to be different with the additional weight distributed along the handle. I'll need to adjust my center of gravity accordingly." He positioned himself, planted his feet shoulder-width apart, gripped the handle, and adjusted his stance twice more. The assembled observers held their collective breath. Marcus lifted the Titan hammer Merkei II off the platform. It rose smoothly, no jerking, no visible strain beyond the natural engagement of muscle groups during a heavy lift. Marcus held it at waist height for a moment, adjusted his grip, then began the trial sequence. 20 paces. His steps were measured but steady. The floor sensors registered over a ton of force with each footfall, but his balance never wavered. First overhead swing. Perfect form. The hammer moved through the air with controlled power. Second overhead swing, identical to the first. Third overhead swing. He added a slight flourish at the top, a tiny rotation of the wrist that showed complete control over the weapon's momentum. He held it at extension for 10 seconds, then 15. At 20 seconds, he was clearly just proving a point. Marcus returned the Titan hammer MK Seku to its platform with the same careful touch he'd used on the original, like he was worried about damaging the equipment rather than himself. He turned to face Commander Vrax and smiled. "Okay, yeah, that's better. This is probably about 85% of my max. Good working weight. I can actually feel the muscle engagement now." The silence in Training Base 7 was absolute. It was the silence of certainty crumbling. It was the silence of paradigms shifting. It was the silence of everyone present realizing that their entire understanding of physical capability had been fundamentally, catastrophically wrong. Vrax sat down on the floor, his legs simply refusing to support him anymore. "You just lifted 2,700 pounds and described it as a good working weight." "Well, yeah, for sets and reps, you don't want to work at your absolute maximum. 85% is ideal for building strength while maintaining proper form." Krath walked over to the hammer, placed one hand on it, and just stared. When he spoke, his voice had lost all its characteristic authority and now sounded more like someone questioning the fundamental nature of reality. "I have trained warriors for 40 years. I have seen species that could tear through starship hulls with their bare hands. I have witnessed feats of strength that defied belief. And in all that time, I never understood that strength wasn't about biological design. It's about environmental pressure and voluntary adaptation." "That's actually a really insightful way to put it," Marcus said. Earth kind of forces you to get strong or die, and humans decided we'd rather get strong. Shayla stepped forward, all four arms trembling. We need to completely restructure the training program. Not just for humans, but for everyone. If voluntary physical stress can enhance capability beyond biological baseline, then we've been wasting potential across every species. The Draxians are going to lose their minds, Torva said from the observation deck. He was grinning despite himself. For 300 years, we've been the strength champions of the galaxy, and now a human accountant's grandfather could have beaten our best warriors. To be fair, Marcus interjected, my grandfather was really dedicated to his training. Set regional records and everything. He wasn't just any accountant. That doesn't help, human Marcus. That makes it so much worse. Xena floated down to the training floor, her light pulsing in patterns that her translator interpreted as a mixture of respect and resignation. I propose that we establish a new training methodology based on human principles. Progressive overload, structured stress and recovery, voluntary discomfort for measurable improvement. The Cultural Integration Committee is going to have a field day with this, Ven said. We'll need to explain to a dozen species that they've been underperforming their entire existence because they never thought to intentionally stress themselves. Not underperforming, Marcus corrected gently. Just not optimizing. There's a difference. You've all been working efficiently within your natural parameters. Humans just got really into pushing past natural parameters because Earth kept trying to kill us and we got stubborn about it. Vrax managed to stand back up. Cadet Webb, on behalf of the Galactic Military Academy, I apologize for underestimating your species. Moving forward, human baselines will be reassessed, training protocols will be revised, and equipment will be appropriately calibrated. I appreciate that, sir. And hey, if you need any help setting up the new training programs, I'm happy to share what I know about progressive strength training. My coach back home gave me a ton of good resources. We would be grateful for any guidance you can provide. The assembled group began to disperse, heading off to various meetings where they would attempt to explain to their superiors that everything they thought they knew about physical training was wrong. Vex lingered, all four arms still wrapped around his datapad. I've been running calculations, Vex said quietly. Based on your performance and the limited data we have on Earth, I extrapolated what an elite human warrior might be capable of. Yeah? What did you come up with? Numbers that my translator insists cannot be correct. Strength outputs that exceed our heavy combat mechs. Endurance profiles that surpass our long-range reconnaissance drones. Pain tolerance that renders most of our deterrent weapons ineffective. That seems a bit exaggerated. I used conservative estimates. Marcus considered this. Well, I mean, Special Forces guys are pretty hardcore, but they're still human. They've got limits. Yes, but those limits appear to be several orders of magnitude beyond what we classified as the upper bounds of biological possibility. I never really thought about it that way. That, Vex said, is perhaps the most terrifying thing about your species. You don't realize how remarkable you are because you're comparing yourselves to each other rather than to the rest of the galaxy. Over the following weeks, the Academy implemented sweeping changes. The Titan Hammer MK2 became standard equipment, with the original hammer relegated to a museum display labeled Historical Equipment, Pre-Human Contact Era. New training protocols emphasizing progressive overload and voluntary stress adaptation were introduced across all programs. Species that had never considered physical self-improvement suddenly discovered they could enhance their capabilities through structured training. The Draxians took to the new programs with aggressive enthusiasm, viewing it as a challenge to reclaim their position as the galaxy's strongest species. The Quillarians approached it with mathematical precision, calculating optimal stress recovery ratios. The Luminis remained skeptical until their first cadets showed measurable improvement, at which point they dove into the research with scientific fervor. Marcus became something of an informal consultant, answering questions about human training methods, demonstrating proper form on various exercises, and generally trying to explain concepts that seemed obvious to him but revolutionary to everyone else. He also became friends with his fellow cadets, who slowly overcame their initial terror and realized he was just a guy who liked lifting heavy things and happened to come from a planet that made that a survival necessity. 3 months after the Titan Hammer incident, Marcus sent a message home to his family. His mother, who worked in agricultural development, responded with concern about whether he was eating enough. His father, a structural engineer, wanted to know if the station's architecture could handle human strength loads. His younger sister asked if he'd met any cool aliens. Marcus sat in his quarters, composing a response on his datapad, while Crone, his roommate, was at the training bay attempting his first progressive overload workout with cautious optimism. "Training's going well," Marcus typed. "Made some good friends. The equipment was a bit light at first, but they upgraded it. The instructors are great, really open to new methodologies. The food's interesting, though I miss actual chicken. Weather here is non-existent because we're on a space station, which is weird but also kind of nice. No surprise hurricanes. Miss you all. Love, Marcus." He sent the message and looked out the viewport at the dying star Kronos 7 orbited. Somewhere out there was Earth, the death world that his species called home and everyone else called a nightmare. The planet that had forged humanity through millions of years of evolutionary pressure and environmental hostility. The planet that had made humans strong enough to accidentally redefine what elite meant for an entire galactic civilization. In Training Bay 7, Instructor Krath watched the evening workout session through the observation deck windows. Cadets from a dozen species worked with equipment that had been retrofitted to actually challenge them. Draxians grunted under loads that would have crushed them months ago. Quillarians discovered that their four-armed physiology gave them unique advantages in certain lifts. Even Lumines were experimenting with gravity resistance training, their crystalline structures adapting in ways their species had never explored. And in the corner of the bay, Marcus was showing Torva proper deadlift form, both of them working with the Titan Hammer MK2 like it was just another day at the gym. Which, for humans, it basically was. Krath pulled up his datapad and began drafting a report for Galactic Military Command. It was titled, Reassessment of Physical Training Protocols, the Human Standard. He paused, considered the implications of what he was about to send up the chain of command, then continued typing. It is the recommendation of this academy that all existing strength and endurance baselines be recalibrated to account for the human training methodology. Initial results show an average 30 to 40% improvement in measurable capabilities across all tested species. These gains are achieved through voluntary stress adaptation, progressive overload, and what humans call pushing through discomfort. He paused again, looking at the training bay. Furthermore, it is imperative that Command understand the following. Cadet Webb is not an exceptional human. He is, by his own admission and Earth standards, average for someone who trains regularly. Elite human warriors, athletes, and specialists represent capabilities significantly beyond what we have observed. Current force projection models should be updated accordingly. Krath added one final note before sending the report. Also, someone should probably tell the Strategic Assessment Division that humans invented an entire category of activity called extreme sports, where they voluntarily risk death for entertainment purposes. We're going to need a much bigger file on this species. He sent the report and returned his attention to the training bay, where Marcus had just asked if the station had any cardio equipment because he was getting bored with just strength training. Krath pulled up the equipment inventory and began drafting another request for the engineering team. This was going to be a very